Hi guys, Chris Parkin here, ASIT and Rotary Camera Club. I've already covered some of the stuff that you can do in Adobe Camera Raw, but some of the interesting things that you can get away with in Camera Raw, it does have a lot more features, and you can really push them to the limits and get creative with them. Now, having said that, for a standard Camera Club competition, not stuff that the stuff that I'm going to show you I wouldn't necessarily recommend using. But if somebody asks you to get creative with your Adobe Camera Raw, this will give you a few ideas of what you can do. And you can see this is actually Lake Rotorua. You might not be able to recognize it from there. It's a wide angle lens, and that's one of the reasons why we've got this curve. So there's lots of ways of dealing with it and treating it traditionally, but I'm just going to go through and use it as a kind of a canvas for showing you some of the stuff you can do. Now, having said that, we're not going to use it for a club entry. Just be careful that you don't start losing your blacks or your highlights again, and that you've got detail in the rest of it, because if you don't, then even no matter how creative you are with a photo, it's off-putting from that technical point of view. It's not showing you control. So if you are playing with your highlights, that's fine. Just make sure that I'll turn the clipping mask on. There we go, and make sure that you don't overexpose your highlights no matter what you're doing. So we're not going to use this slider very much to start with. We might well come back to it. But the first thing I wanted to show you was the curve tool. Now, those of you who've worked in a darkroom will recognize this effect. This is your standard negative, and all I've done is drag the columns up and back and reverse them, so black is now white, white is now black, and the yellow tinge is because we're obviously working in a colored image. Now if we go to convert to grayscale, that'll make it look more like your standard black and white negative. So that's one option. We'll stay with the black and white negative and flip these back in here. And the other interesting effect that you can do is what's called a Sabatter effect, which is if you're actually in the darkroom and doing this, you would half expose the image, put it through your developer solution, and then expose it to light again. And what it does is it reverses some of the colors, so you get a really weird, surreal look on it, and it can look quite cool. The neat thing about the darkroom is you have no idea how much each time you do it, what is going to happen. The cool thing about Photoshop is, or Adobe Camera Raw, is you have infinite control over it, and so you can make sure that your sky is darkened as much as or as little as you want, and you can put in numbers of points. It's quite easy to overkill, so if you have multiple curves in here, it can start looking very, very weird very, very fast, and isn't necessarily a good thing. But hey, there's the option there, and you can show you how to do it. You can also change the whole color hue using the curves, and this is quite useful later on if you're dealing with shadows and want to darken just a piece of an image down. You can actually do that, and I'll show you in another video. But yeah, so you can really start pushing your boundaries of what you're doing. The one thing I would say is when you're doing this, think why you're doing it. If you're trying to make it look like an alien landscape, then that's fantastic. We've got a semi-alien landscape. We probably need to increase the contrast, but you notice that when we increase the contrast now, because we've got those curves in place, things just don't behave themselves. So it gets a little bit more entertaining when you're trying to work out what on earth is going on. Anyway, it makes life fun. So yeah, obviously we can use these sliders, and it will change this piece of the sky with aqua. So as we change that, it will actually change the hue of it. Obviously most of the sky was blue, so that's weird. That looks like it's moving. Sorry, I'm getting distracted. Yeah, so you can play with that as well. we need to watch that we've not got burnt out highlights, and don't create too much noise and all the other bits and pieces that you want to look for in a good image. And that is so not a good image. Let's cancel. Filter, and we'll go back to camera raw filter and start again. And the nice thing about it, it doesn't save until you tell it to save. One tool that is really useful is this one, is your selective adjustment. If you've got clouds and you're wanting to draw lines of patches of light, then that can work quite nicely. You'll need to play around with it to get it to look right. So I've brightened this part of the sky up, and we want to decrease the amount of feathering so that you get a relatively sharp line. And it almost looks like a spotlight. Now, because I've drawn it all in one go, that's not great, because I can't change bits of it at a time. So what I'm going to do is increase the size of our brush, and this is where a tablet comes in really useful, and I don't have mine hooked up at the moment, because it allows you to draw with a lot more refinement. So let's remove and erase some of this. So go to erase, erase that edge. So we've only just got the piece that's actually giving us the sky, and the reason for that is I'm going to put in a separate piece down the bottom and use a new brush with a little bit of feathering and make that highlight. And then I'm going to click on this one and decrease the clarity and the contrast and the exposure a little bit, so it looks a little bit more like the light's coming in and then hitting the ground there, and increase the exposure on this one. Increase the saturation, and by the way, you can also increase the color tint, so you can actually make it yellow, and we'll make this one a little bit more yellow as well. And let's turn that clipping mask off. I'm going to have to go back and fix that and erase this, and then you can give a nice shaft of light. And it takes time to do, and obviously if you're running it in Photoshop, it's a lot easier because you can use layer masks. Oops. And when you're running layer masks, you can get rid of the pieces that you don't want, and use all the pen tools and bits and pieces as well. But hey, anyway, gives you an idea about what you can do with this. And there we go, we've now got a spotlight on the lake. So go cancel and reset and do another one. Let's change my dice picture. So this is all done almost all in Photoshop. You can get a very similar effect using a rear sync flash. The fun part of that is getting the darn thing to behave itself. But let's say we want to change the color of one of those dice, reduce the size of our brush, paint in the area, and make sure we've got it nicely painted. And then you can click on color and grab your saturation and grab a red, and there we go, we've changed the color of that part of the dice. Not entirely effective in this case. I'd probably actually go and grab a new one and paint over it again, and add the color again, and just keep building that up until you've got it done the way you want. You want to get rid of this area down here where I've just slipped, so Control Plus allows you to zoom in and just make sure that you do this neatly so you can't see where you've actually done those changes at the edges. Because I've got two layers there, I'm going to have to change back and forth between them, but hey, that's gives you an idea of what we're doing. What are some of the other functions you can do? Actually, we'll go back to the other one, and sorry, I'm coming down with a cold and apparently it's affecting my brain. Starting to feel sick. There's some really interesting radial filters, so you can actually choose to only affect part of that central part of the image, and you should be able to change the feathering. There we go. So you can just affect that inside, outside of it, and you can change how much it is, outside or inside. And this can be quite good for doing a vignette in Adobe Camera Raw. The other way of doing your vignette would be to use that paintbrush tool and just paint around the edges. The nice thing about this is you've got that level of control there. The bad thing about it is you're always going to get rounded corners. So yeah, it's 6 on one, half a dozen the other. And we'll get rid of the colour. So to do that, we drop the hue down to 0, and that's it. It just goes away. Now there's two types of vignettes that you can use. There's a white vignette and a dark vignette. Both, if overused, can look horrible. The white vignette tends to look horrible to start with sooner, because our eye is drawn to white areas, and because our eye is drawn to white bright areas, if you use the vignette, then what happens is our eye is drawn away from the center of the image. So it tends not to be fantastic. There are times when it works quite well, and one of those is when you go for a sepia tone. And the reason for that is that it actually matches with the old style of image. So we go split tone, hue, and a little bit of red, a little bit of orange. But in this case it's not gone and painted in the outside of that. Learned something new. So because it's not given me the effect on all of the image that I wanted, let's get rid of that, and let's go and show you how to do it in the with a brush. So we'll just paint in, and it's going to do the same thing because we're not actually painting colour, we're painting shade, and because it starts off darker, it's just going to not want to do very much, which means you need to go new, and you keep building this up. There we go, we've built up that piece, put a third one in, and we can start building that up. Now, and we're going to need a fourth one to get rid of those spots, or you might want to go and get the clone tool out and do it that way. So yeah, lots of ways of doing it. I've done a very rough and ready job of this. You should aim for a much cleaner layer mask, but obviously I'm trying to show you a reasonable number of things in a short space of time. I'm sure you have better things to do than listen to my voice all day. I'm just trying to think what else we can use in here. Hue, saturation, luminance. This can be quite a cool tool. Luminance is your brightness, so you can actually deliberately drop all the colours in the blues. Saturation is the amount of colour there, so you can make that a much more vivid colour. Or you can use this to selectively desaturate parts of your image. This one's not going to work because there's nothing that's a single that's one colour. And you can also change the hue, so we can give the sky a purple colour cast. As I said, if you're getting creative, then it's cool. If you're trying to do this for a competition, I'd steer well away from it. But hey, lens correction. Now that might be helpful. So one of the things we can do is sync with the computer. Oops, it's whinging at me. Sync with the previous results, and it hasn't got a correction found at the moment, and that's probably because my lens is slightly odd, so I have to try and work it out myself. So there's some distortion that way, and I think even if I put maximum barrel distortion on, it's still going to end up with a huge curve, and that's because it's an 8mm lens, which is not fantastic. Well, fantastic for taking the photos, not fantastic for correcting. But remember to crop off the edges of your image, because if you leave it like that, you'll have huge patches of white here, and it'll just look like you haven't bothered. So you can either crop or you can scale. Obviously, if you scale, it keeps the same ratio, and you can also create the amount of lens vignette as well, because that tends to happen quite a lot with a wide-angle lens. The brightness just drops off. You can also change your verticals and your horizontal adjustment. So yeah, you can get quite weird with it, and it looks like somebody's been drinking, which I haven't, so I'll get off that, because that's just heading down the wrong track. You can also change the amount of grain, so if you're going for that old image, you can change the amount, the size, and the roughness, so you can have a relatively smooth grain image, which just basically makes the whole thing look flat, or you can put in a lot of image and make the image look quite old. And this is your other way of doing your post-crop vignette, rather than doing it manually. You've got the option of changing it there, and then you can change the midpoint. What I'll do is I'll change the amount of feathering for starters, because it makes it easier to see. So there's your midpoint, you're basically moving it in and out. Roundness means that you end up with the corners being rounded off versus being a perfect circle if you take it all the way to 100%. And your highlights, that was the issue that we were having before, that our highlights or our dark points were actually sneaking through. You can allow the highlights to sneak through like that in this case. So yeah, there's lots to play with. Obviously, if this was going to be finished, it would need to be cropped, and I would want to, let's just finish this off a little bit more, rotate it a touch more so that horizon is actually really crooked. Otherwise, if we leave it uncropped, if we leave it partly tilted, it doesn't look like it's properly canted. It looks like you've just not bothered to fix it. And in this case, I'm going to crop it in Photoshop just because it's a little bit easier to do. There's our crop tool, and move that in, and move that in. And I should have cropped it in Adobe Camera Raw, because I've not left myself enough space up here and here. But yeah, that's another time to show you some of the tools that you can use in Photoshop to actually autofill this, but I'll save it for another day.